You are now tuned in to the Addicted to Success.com podcast, where geniuses, entrepreneurs, and next level game changers share their juicy little secrets on achieving massive success. This is the advice you wish you heard years ago. Be prepared and take note as we expose the realness and the raw of what it takes to be successful on Addicted to Success.com.
Now, before we get into this interview, I have an exclusive opportunity for you that I'd love to bring to your attention. And that is, I have just launched a 6 to 12 month mastermind called the Circle of Influence, where I'll be taking you under my wing to show you how to build a platform online that generates an income for you so that you can have more freedom in your life. I'm also going to show you how to become a powerful influencer online so that you can score interviews and so you can get exposure on major publications and platforms. And I'm going to even show you how to build these platforms yourself, such as a website, a podcast, a YouTube channel, and a social media following so that you can get your message out there to millions. I'm also going to show you how to network with other incredible leaders online so that you can interview them and so that you can collaborate with them, and really show you how to refine your story so you can share it in an unforgettable way to score more interviews, to score book deals, and to gain more speaking opportunities so that you can become a powerhouse leader. Now, if this speaks to you, make sure you head over to iamjoelbrown.com/apply and get in before I close my doors on this live, interactive, exclusive opportunity where I'm going to go deep with you and with the community of Circle of Influence Game Changers. Don't miss this. Now let's get into this interview.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Addicted to Success podcast. I'm your host, Joel Brown, and I'm here today with Alan Stein Jr., who is a high-performance coach who has worked with the likes of Kevin Durant, and he actually had the opportunity to train with and work with Kevin Durant when he was 15 years old. So he saw him before the massive levels of success. He's also worked events with LeBron James, Kobe Bryant, Chris Paul, and has spoken on many stages around the world, teaching people how to apply these high-performance strategies to their life. So Alan's new book, Raise Your Game, has just come out. So let's dive deep into this with Alan Stein. I can't wait for you to hear the strategies that he has in place and just what it's like to work with world-class legends. Alan, thank you for joining us on the Addicted to Success podcast.
Oh, the pleasure's all mine, Joel. Thank you so much, my friend.
Yeah, I'm excited, man. I was a big NBA basketball fan when I was a kid. I remember the first time that I was ever inspired to follow my dreams was when I watched Space Jam with Bugs Bunny and Michael Jordan back in the day at 7 years old. And, you know, I remember getting Michael Jordan's biography book called Rare Air. And I remember reading about his mindset in there and how he'd wake up early in the morning and how he would train with some people that had strengths that he didn't have. And hearing about his routines and his daily habits. And that was really inspiring for me. So what inspired you to step into this arena working with basketball players and high-performance athletes?
Well, I'll tell you what, Joel, I'm sitting here in my home office right outside of Washington, D.C., and I've got some memorabilia around my office, and I actually have a copy of Rare Air sitting right on a bookshelf within arm's distance of me. So, yeah, that was that was a very influential book as well, and certainly Michael Jordan, not only the way he changed the game on a global level, but the way he changed culture. But you just dug into some really great things there as far as what really separated him from everyone else were his mindsets and his habits and his routines and his disciplines and the consistency at which he did that. And, you know, basketball was my first identifiable passion. I fell in love with the game at 5 or 6 years old, and it's been a major staple in my life ever since. I mean, I'll turn 43, in January, and here, I'm still heavily involved in the game of basketball, and it still had a major impact on my life. And, as I got older as a player, and then as I got into coaching, I was just so enamored with the performance side and what players and coaches would do to increase their chance of being successful. And you've already teed it up brilliantly. It always comes back to their habits, their routines, their disciplines, their mindsets. And high performers know that it's not what you do occasionally that matters. It's what you do every single day. And that's one of the reasons, one of many, that somebody like Michael Jordan was as great as he was.
I love that. I love how you broke that down there. And I feel like when it comes to high performance achievement, there are definitely some really key and core things that we should be focusing on. How do we really step into a higher level of performance? Like what are maybe some points or steps that you would introduce us to today that we can start actioning and implementing in our life?
Well, the very first one is you got to fall in love with the basics. You got to fall in love with the fundamentals. You can't get bored with them, and you certainly can't try to skip over them or resist them. That every high performer I've ever been around is incredibly confident in their ability and confident in their performance, but they also have the humility to understand that the basics and the fundamentals provide the foundation for everything else to which the house is built. And, if we're talking about a basketball player, that means they continually work, on their shooting mechanics and their footwork and the most basic of offensive moves. And they work towards mastery. They don't work to just kind of mail it in and to just go through the motions and then skip to the sexy stuff. They really appreciate that that's the foundation to which their whole game is built, and understanding those basics, but also realizing that just because something is basic, it doesn't mean that it's easy. Those aren't synonyms. And a lot of people use those words interchangeably, and that's not correct. What it takes to be successful in any area of our life is incredibly basic. But what it takes to be successful, as is definitely not easy. To be able to have the mindset and routines and habits required and do those things every day, even when you don't feel like it, even when it's not convenient, even when you don't want to. That's what separates high performers from everyone else. So I think, mastering the basics and having the humility to acknowledge that they're not going to be easy to do consistently is the very first step to a path of higher performance.
I love this. I really love it. And it's so true. I think it's that unsexy, uncool thing. It's the swinging the axe at the tree every day. It's that consistent action that you keep taking. And a lot of people try and avoid it because they think it's monotonous. But what I've even found in my own business, Alan, is that establishing ground early is going to be the part where you're going to put a lot of effort into play until you share the vision and you have people that come and support you in it. You start hiring people, or whether it's on a team too, like just getting your foundations down. This is where the strength really lies. One of the other things I noticed as well within high performing athletes and even high performing entrepreneurs, because we have a lot of entrepreneurs that are listening right now, they could even liken it and connect to what it's like to be a high performance athlete and a high performance entrepreneur, is that they are very present. So how do we step into more presence?
I love that. And, what I found too, that, having been in the basketball world for almost 20 years and then making the leap over to the corporate space for the last couple, that I can't assign an exact percentage to it, but it's probably upwards of 85, 90% of what works in sport will work in business when we're talking strictly about principles and strategies. Obviously I understand the difference between sport and business, but high performance really transcends any area. And it doesn't matter if you're trying to be an elite entrepreneur, an elite sales professional, an elite basketball player, or an elite soccer coach. These things are all, there's just high crossover and high transfer. And you just hit on arguably the most important one, which is living in the present moment. And, I know as a 43-year-old father of 3 kids, a private business owner, a public speaker, and an author, that living in the present moment is the perfect example of basic versus easy, because what it takes to live in the present moment is very basic, but it is without question the biggest challenge I face every single day. And I would imagine many of your listeners do as well, because it's so easy for us to get distracted by the past, distracted by what happened yesterday, or even distracted by what happened this morning. It's also easy for us to get anxious about the future and worried about tomorrow or worried about next week, when everything we need to perform at our best is right now. It's right in the present moment. And, there's some steps that one can take to improve their ability to be mindful and to be present. And I think that's the best investment someone can make. the short definition of it, I've heard this attributed to Oprah Winfrey, and I've also heard it from Nick Saban, the brilliant college football coach with Alabama. And they say to be where your feet are. That's the definition of being present. Be where your feet are, which means wherever your feet are, you make sure that's where your head and your heart are as well. But we live in a world now where people think multitasking is sexy, that multitasking is required. I mean, how many times have you been with someone, Joel, and they're staring at their phone while you're with them? They're not present while they're with you. Their mind and their emotions, they're somewhere else. And unconsciously that whatever's on their phone is more important than you at that moment. And, that's not being present. And we're all guilty of that to some degree at many times throughout the day, but the goal is to lessen those occurrences, to be fully present, fully engaged. And if you want to dive deeper in that, there's kind of a three pillars of what it actually takes to live present. And these are some rather actionable things that folks can put into practice, but it's something I have to look in the mirror and remind myself of every day.
Ooh, Alan, you got to be careful there with that comment. Yeah, the comment about the looking at the phone and then making that more of a priority. I bet there's going to be some listeners right now that heard that and they're going to go home and give their partner hell. I heard on a podcast today that this means that I'm no longer priority.
No, it is, but it's amazing how our unconscious mind works. I mean, think about it, and one thing that's just so remarkable about technology is, I mean, you and I are many oceans away right now and we're having this amazing conversation. But if you and I were in person right now, if I was in Bali and I was sitting next to you and we were just having a chat, intuitively, there's a few things we would pick up on. One, if we were talking and the entire time I was staring at my phone and barely glancing up and I'm answering you with short little answers and grunts, you would intuitively know that I'm not that interested in what you have to say. Whereas if I put the phone face down and I'm making great eye contact with you and I have open body language and I'm listening with my eyes and my ears, and when you say something, when there's an appropriate break in the conversation, I kind of repeat it back in your words to make sure that I heard you correctly. Then you would know intuitively and unconsciously, you would go, wow, Alan cares about me. He values what I have to say. I'm clearly important to him. And just think about those two different messages that we send to other people and how important they are for creating human connection and for establishing trust and for building rapport and for building chemistry. One of them is a glue. When you show someone you care about them, that is a glue that binds a relationship, and the other one simply erodes it. And once again, I'm not perfect. I have my phone as often as a lot of people do, but I'm getting better about when it's time to set it down and invest my full attention into someone else, then I make sure that I'm doing that. And even right now, I mean, I'm not checking email while I'm having this conversation. I'm not folding laundry while I'm having this conversation. You and your listeners have my full undivided attention and my full presence in this moment, because that's what's most important. And I think that's just a daily practice that all of us should get into. And it doesn't matter if you're talking about an intimate relationship with a spouse, a relationship with your child, or your leadership executive team at your business. You owe the people that you care about your full attention, because that's the number one gift you can give a human being today, is your attention in the present moment. It's more valuable than money. It's more valuable than anything else you could give another human being, is your attention. Because as you know, time is finite. It's the most precious resource we have because it's not promised. And a guy like you and your listeners, you can always make more money. You have tremendous skill sets and a lot of attributes. You could always make more money, but you can't get time back. And that's why giving people our time and investing it in others is one of the best things we can do to build solid relationships.
Hey, I couldn't agree with you more. It's so true. And I think as even I've gotten older, I've noticed that even more. I'm getting way more vigilant with my time. But the time that I do spend with people, I give them as much value as possible. And I like that you're saying basically you being present is a present for someone else. It's such a gift you give. I love that, man. I really love that. And thank you for sharing it. That we're already jumping into some incredible insight here. We've only just started. So, Alan, tell me, when you watch people like Kevin Durant, when you watch people like LeBron James, Chris Paul, what do you believe is the key things, like 2 to 3 things that you notice that they're doing that is separating them from the other players in the game? Because they get mentioned a lot. They've got incredible stats. Some of them are even arguably the top players in NBA right now. What is it that separates them from your everyday player?
Well, funny enough, it's actually kind of a continuation of where we're talking about with this living in the present moment. And in fact, with basketball players, we would use the term play present. And I'll take it a little bit deeper, because the 3 things that it takes to play present are also are 3 of the biggest separators that guys like that have. The first is they always focus on the next play, because that's the only play they can still have an effect on. They can't do anything about the play that just happened. So maybe they missed a shot. Maybe they turned the ball over. Maybe they thought they got fouled, but the referee didn't call it. Well, whatever it was, it's over. You can't do anything to change it. You cannot rewind time, and you cannot relive time. So they have a very quick, or I guess a short memory. I call it a whiteboard memory. If you write something on a whiteboard, then you quickly wipe it off, it's gone forever. They have that type of memory. So a guy like Kevin Durant can miss a wide open 3-pointer, and in a split second, he's wiped that from his memory, and he's already sprinting back on defense so that he can be at his best. And the same thing is true when something good happens. LeBron James hits a huge shot. Well, he doesn't stand there and celebrate it. If there's still time on the clock, he has to immediately move to the next play and go to the next thing. And, in the fast-paced world of business and entrepreneurship, it's the same thing. You submit a proposal to a client and it doesn't go well. Move on to the next play. Because if you let a previous experience negatively affect a current performance, then you're only going to be mediocre at best. And if you take somebody like Stephen Curry, who many people think is the best shooter in the world, arguably the best shooter of all time, one of the things that makes him so special is that he could miss 7 shots in a row, and he still thinks the 8th one is going in. Like, there's no question in his mind, because he doesn't let the previous 7 misses affect him. He's shooting that 8th one just like he made the first 7. And, a guy like Steph could miss 30 shots in a row, and he will beg for the ball when there's 2 seconds left and the game is tied, because he always believes the next shot is going in. And that's, I think that's incredibly important, and once again, you can extrapolate that down to anything. If you and I are business partners and we have a disagreement in the morning, you think we should zig and I think we should zag, and we have a very heated debate about it. And we, thankfully we air our differences and we debate it in a very professional and respectful way, but we both see things very different. Well, once that conversation comes to a resolution or a conclusion, it's over. We need to move to the next play. We can't keep rehashing it. And, if you decide to make a concession and we go with my idea for this business decision, and then a week later you start hanging it over my head or undermining the fact that we went with my decision, then you're not focused on the next play. And there's no way that we can perform at our highest level if we're not focused on what's coming next. And, that's not an excuse for being sloppy. That's not an excuse for being lazy. That's not an excuse for a basketball player casually missing a shot and thinking it doesn't matter. No, these things are still incredibly important. But once they are in the past, you have to move on to the next play.
Oh, I love that. It's like being present and then it's going next play, then going back to being present and being next play. You're going back and forth in this dance between the two, right?
Yeah, well, ultimately, yeah, and I love that. That's very insightful, the way that you brought that up. I mean, in theory, the next play is actually the present moment, because, that's what's so crazy about time, is that it's ever fleeting, it's continuous, that you can't stop time and you can't pause time. So literally, the sentence that I'm speaking right now is over. It's done. And now I have to focus on the next word that's coming out of my mouth. So the present is actually the next play that's coming, because there's no lapse. It's not, hey, what's going to happen in the 4th quarter? That would be worried about the future. And it's not, hey, the dunk that I just missed, because that's in the past. It's literally what's happening next. So focusing on the next play is pillar number 1. Pillar number 2 of living present, playing present, and what separates guys like LeBron, Kobe, and KD from everyone else is they focus on what they can control. It's called controlling the controllables. And there's really only two things that we have 100% control over 100% of the time. And that's our own effort and our own attitude. And generally speaking, any time we spend worried about something outside of our own effort and our own attitude is usually not a very good investment of our time. We want to focus on what we can control, not on the things that we can't. And once again, that's difficult to do because the vast majority of things that happen in the world are outside of our control, but we still control the effort that we put forth, and we control our attitude, which in this case could be a reaction to something else that happens. And I've always found attitude to be a very interesting, I found effort to be a very interesting one. Because, and I would imagine even with your listeners, if I asked all of your listeners and we did a poll and say, is working hard a choice? I'm pretty sure all of them would say yes. They'd nod their head or raise their hand. They know that when they put forth a good effort, it was because they chose to. But then what I find interesting is that means by default, not working hard is also a choice. And yet most people don't own that side of the coin. When you call somebody out or hold them accountable for not giving their best effort, that's usually when excuses come up. That's usually when someone says, well, I wasn't feeling good, or I didn't get enough sleep, or I was hungry, or I was this, I was that. I mean, at the end of the day, your effort is always a choice. And yes, there'll be some days where you are tired and you are sick and you're not feeling well, but your tank might only be 70% full, but you still have the choice to give 100% of your 70%. And, if you're looking to be a high performer, you need to make the choice consistently to give your best effort in everything that you do. And, that takes care of the effort side. And then on the attitude side, it just really comes down to your ability to react to the outside world. And there are going to be things that are coming at you every day. There's challenges, there's adversity, you're going to go through failure. There's going to be all sorts of ups and downs. And high performers try to take everything that happens to them and around them and use it in a way that serves them and moves them forward instead of a way that cripples them and moves them back. Even when something bad happens, they try to find the lesson or try to find the nugget that they can pull from that that's still going to make them better. So you take a player like a Kobe Bryant, if he loses a basketball game, it's going to end up being a win in the future because he's going to study why he lost. He's going to tighten the screws and refocus the lens. He's going to course correct and make a few changes. And then whatever happened that time ain't going to happen to him again in the future because he has that attitude of always using things in a way that serve him. So controlling the controllables is incredibly important.
I love this. And I think that that's really when you start trusting yourself, right? You start reclaiming your power and knowing that you're the master of your destiny and not a slave to the environment and the other agendas around it. And, I think that when I see a lot of these players that you mentioned, Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, Stephen Curry, they have this force to be reckoned with, confidence that they carry. What would you say would be a great way to increase your confidence? Because I feel like this is such a big conversation that a lot of people feel like they lack self-belief. They are low on self-esteem. Right? So how do we increase confidence?
I believe the most effective way to increase confidence is through demonstrated performance. So you actually have to deserve confidence. It can't be this false bravado. In my opinion, the jury's still out on this kind of fake it till you make it mindset. I think sometimes that can be a bridge to get you where you need to go. But true self-belief and true confidence comes from demonstrated performance. And demonstrated performance only comes from putting in the work and putting in the reps. I mean, the reason a guy like Kobe Bryant is confident is because he has put in millions of hours, unseen hours, when the cameras aren't rolling and the cheerleaders aren't dancing and the lights aren't on. He's putting in work then to build his confidence to deserve the right to be confident on the court when the actual game starts. So, I think it comes back to putting in those reps. I mean, they'll always, there's always going to be things that can shake our confidence and rattle us a little bit. We're fallible as human beings, but generally speaking, if you've put in the work to the point where you absolutely believe with every ounce of your being that you deserve to be successful, or you deserve to make this shot, or you deserve to have this proposal accepted, that's when real confidence, starts to build.
Yeah, I remember this Kobe Bryant quote. He says, "I can't relate to lazy people. We don't even speak the same language. I don't understand you, and I don't want to understand you." I remember that quote. It rings so true.
Yeah.
It's like he's just like got this guard around his mind where he's like, I'm not going to be lazy. He was so dead set on just being confident and putting in the effort and maintaining that attitude to win.
Absolutely. Nick Saban, the coach at Alabama, said something similar. He said, mediocre people don't like high performers, and high performers don't like mediocre people. And it's true. I mean, if you are lazy and you want to do the bare minimum and you're just, mailing it in, and you're around a group of high performers, you're going to feel awful about yourself. You're going to be the outcast. You're the sore thumb sticking out. So you don't want to hang around high performers. And same thing, if you're driven, you're relentless, you're obsessed about getting better, and everyone around you is lazy and mailing it in, you don't want to be around them either. So yeah, the whole concept of you are the company you keep, it really comes out with that. And yeah, I can even fathom Kobe Bryant spending a few minutes with anybody that's not wired to at least want to improve. And then, just to finish our trilogy, the last, so we have focus on the next play, focus on what we can control. And then the third one is to focus on the process. And the process, the best way I can describe the process is, any of your listeners right now, just picture a brick wall. And more times than not, when someone pictures a brick wall, they don't picture any bricks missing. They don't picture any of them sticking out or diagonal. They picture a sound, sturdy brick wall. Well, that's the outcome. The process of building that brick wall is simply taking each brick individually and laying it with care and precision. It's taking one brick and setting it exactly where it needs to go, taking a breath, and then going and picking up another brick and setting it exactly where it needs to go. And if you stay focused just on the individual bricks and making sure that you lay each one with care and precision, and you lay each one exactly where it's supposed to go, there's a good chance that the wall will just take care of itself. You don't even have to worry about the wall if you focus on laying the bricks. And that's ultimately what it means to focus on the process. We all are very outcome driven. Our society is outcome driven, but we need to focus on the process of what it'll take to increase the likelihood of the outcome that we want. And that's the key. Is there are no outcomes that are guaranteed. In fact, the only outcome that I know is guaranteed is death. I mean, no one gets out of this thing we call life alive. That's the only thing that I know for fact. Everything else.
Death and taxes. Death and taxes.
Yeah. And what's funny is every year somebody comes out that hasn't been paying their taxes. So I think there's some people that have even figured out a way around that. But yes, you are 100% right. But outside of that, we all need to be in the mindset of how can we increase the likelihood of getting the outcome that we want. And it's by living in the process. And, perfect example. I know before we started recording, we were kind of exchanging our thoughts on the book writing process. And, my book's out, and you've got an awesome book that's coming out. And the success of your book will be heavily predicated on the process. And from the amount you've shared already, I mean, you have a great process intact. I mean, you already said your number one goal, the first goal, was to write the most meaningful and helpful book possible. Well, that's a huge part of the process. If you would have skipped over that part, that's just laying sloppy bricks. That's like just taking bricks and just throwing them over there and hoping they land in a pile. So you've got this entire process from writing the book, to having the book finalized and edited and printed, to then distributing the book, to then marketing the book. I mean, all of these things will require a process, and how successful your book is will be completely predicated on the process, and the strategy and execution that you implement will be the determining factor. It won't have anything to do with luck. It won't have anything to do with accident. Yes, you might catch a good break here and there, but it's always going to be a result of the process.
Oh, yes. I love it. The process. And I think that some people try and shy away from it so much so because it requires so much effort. And this uncomfortable zone that so many people avoid is really where the magic lies. And people are missing out on so much of stepping into their potential in fear of being judged, in fear of not being good enough, in fear of making mistakes. And I often say to a lot of my clients, like, you know, we got to look at where you're standing right now. Are you in destruction? Are you in stagnation? Or are you in creation? And I just love the differentiators that you threw in there about like the process and then being present with the moment and then controlling the controllables. What that is, you're taking your power back and moving to a place of creation. It's like, I know that this is going on around me, but what can I create now? What could my next move be that will move me in a place where there's progress and not just movement, but progress? So I love this, Alan. This is really great advice. So there's a piece in your book that I like too, where you state it's so important to know thyself. And you use like an example of Eminem in there too. I'd love for you to share that piece because I think it's really important.
For sure. And I'm a huge Eminem fan, not so much just for his content, but for his creativeness, his respect for the process. You know, the guy's been, whether you like his work or not, I mean, he's a lyrical genius. He's a wordsmith, and he's someone that stuck to the process well before he was famous. And then once he started getting some notoriety, he dived even deeper into that process to continue to be, you know, what many people think is one of the top MCs of all time. But yeah, 8 Mile is one of my favorite movies. And, you know, sorry if it's a spoiler alert, because I know it's been out for over a decade, but, you know, at the end where he's doing this rap battle and he decides that for his side of the battle, instead of making fun of the other guy, he's going to make fun of himself and expose all of his insecurities and all of his weaknesses, because once he does that, then the other guy won't have anything to say about him. And, you know, I think that's kind of a way to approach this concept of self-awareness. And I believe heavily self-awareness is incredibly important for whatever it is that we're looking for in life, whether it's happiness and fulfillment, or it's success and significance, that we have to know ourselves. We have to know what we're good at, but what we're not so good at, what we're passionate about, what we kind of loathe. You know, what are our fears? What are our insecurities? What are our dreams? What is our purpose? And kind of figuring all of this stuff out, because it makes up who we are. And most people only want to spend time on the good stuff, you know, the things they like, the things they're good at. But you have to know both. Again, if we keep comparing it to the game of basketball, you know, a player like Kobe Bryant, he has to know where his weaknesses are. He has to know where he could potentially get exposed, you know, by an offensive player that he's guarding. He has to know those things because it'll make him that much more dangerous as a player. And then, of course, you have, you know, once you figure out kind of your weaknesses and your fears and your insecurities, depending on whether we're talking about sport or business, then you have to make a decision. Is this an applicable weakness that I need to address and improve because it's going to limit my ability to be successful? Or is it something I can completely disregard and put all of my focus into my strengths and making my strengths even stronger? You know, I'm a big believer, especially for those in the entrepreneurial world, in the business world, that people spend too much time worrying about their weaknesses. I think you need to know them and you need to identify them so you don't step on those landmines, but you don't need to spend much time worrying about them. Focus on what you do really well and see if you can make that elite and make that world class. You know, I mean, Shaquille O'Neal's one of the most dominant centers we've ever seen in the NBA. Well, he wasn't a very good ball handler. Well, who cares? He didn't need to handle the ball. That wasn't really his role. So he didn't need to spend a lot of time to try and go from a bad ball handler to a mediocre ball handler. Instead, he spent his time on the things that made him elite. So I think sometimes we put too much focus on the things we don't do well and should be spending a lot more time and energy and focus on the things that we can do well and make those things even more elite.
Yes, I like the differentiation between like noticing that you have those weaknesses there, but not worrying about them, and then playing your position like Shaquille O'Neal did. That's such a great breakdown. I also know, like in your book, you mentioned the fogged up mirror, where there's this contradiction at work when we talk about self-awareness, right? That like so many people, what they do is they think that they know themselves, but in actual fact, they don't really know themselves that well. And I feel like even for me, I can say from my personal experience, just when I thought that I knew myself, more has been unfolded. But it usually is unfolded like in relationships. It's unfolded when, you know, my back is against the wall. It's unfolded when I come across someone that, you know, that comes in and goes, wait a minute, there's a better way to do these things. It's like, it's moments of growth. And I feel like there's this beauty in the struggle. And the beauty is, if there's any gift that we get, is to get to know ourselves even more so that we can then really tap into our power and strengths and move through the world and not leaning so much in our weaknesses, but moving with power and strength in what we know we're best at. And I love your piece in the book around the fogged up mirror, that we're just staring so often in a fogged up mirror.
Yeah. Oh, very well said. I love the way that you brought that up, because, you know, as human beings, we don't know what we don't know, and we don't know our blind spots. That's why they're blind spots. But with self-awareness, we can at least have the humility to know, hey, I have some blind spots. I don't know what they are at the moment, but I know that I have them. You know, we talk about a basketball player that takes a bad shot. That's not that big of a deal. That's okay. It's the player that takes a bad shot that doesn't know it was a bad shot. That's the one that's dangerous, because now they're going to repeat that behavior. So it's funny because it sounds kind of contradictory, but one of the ways to heighten our own self-awareness is to ask others. But we need to ask the people that know us the best. This is not something you would go up and just ask some random stranger. This needs to be the people that you know the best, or, you know, which was certainly my case, was actually a professional. I mean, I was going through some counseling and some therapy. I was going through a divorce, and a trained professional was able to kind of help me heighten my self-awareness, because she got me to see things that I couldn't see. Because part of the problem can be, as you just said so perfectly, we might not be very accurate in our evaluation of ourselves. And I'll use myself as an example. You know, I used to think I was a really good listener. I mean, if you would have asked me 10 years ago, Alan, are you a good listener? I would have said yes. And I would have actually believed it, because I thought that I was. But then as I started to get a little closer and ask some insightful questions of my inner circle, and this therapist and counselor that was working with me basically brought to the fact that I was not a very good active listener, that I was very judgmental, that most of the time while you were talking, Joel, I wasn't even listening to you. I was just formulating my own response so that I could talk. And, you know, I didn't realize that, but they brought that to light, and I realized I wasn't a good listener. So it's been something that I've consciously really tried to work on, you know, over the last several years. But that was a perfect example of my self-awareness just was not very accurate. I mean, I thought I was a good listener. I thought I was self-aware, and I wasn't. So one of the things we all need to do, and as you just mentioned, through relationships and through these different connections, we need to provide a safe environment where the people closest to us feel that they can be, you know, honest and transparent, and hold us accountable and give us the truth. And we're going to be willing to accept that. And it doesn't mean we like what they say, but we're going to be open to it. Because if you're not open to someone sharing some of your blind spots or sharing what you don't know, if you're not coachable, then once again, you've put a very low ceiling on, you know, on your potential, on what you're capable of doing. And, you know, especially a skill as important as listening. Everything in my life has gotten better as I've become a better listener. I mean, from my relationships to my ability to serve clients, I mean, everything has gotten better. So, I mean, that was a major thorn in my paw, and I didn't even know that I had it. So I'm thankful I was at least open enough to receive that from the people that cared enough about me to share it.
I love that. I absolutely love that. That is something you've noticed about yourself, and also for you to share this vulnerably too. You know, we could get on this podcast and we could say how amazing you are as a speaker and a coach and an author and everything, but I love that you went there, because this is relatable. You know, this is what we all go through. We all have our weaknesses, and my biggest thing too is, like, I've noticed when I open up and I share my shortcomings and my experiences, is that people can connect even more. And then when we have that connection, now we have a real conversation that actually shifts. Absolutely. Rather than being spoken to, you're speaking with.
I love that distinction. And, you know, think about it, whether you're a coach or a player, or you're an entrepreneur or an executive, as we started the conversation with, everything comes down to relationships, which is why being present is so important, because you build relationships. But let's just look at it from a business standpoint. In a business, there are two relationships that will determine the success and the sustainability of your business. And it doesn't matter if you're a one-person business. It doesn't matter if you have a Fortune 500 business. It doesn't matter if you sell products or you sell services. The relationship that you have with those that you serve, so your clients and your customers, will determine how successful you are. And then your relationship with those on your team, your colleagues and your coworkers. And even for any solopreneurs out there that run their own business, you're not doing it all yourself. I guarantee that you have some other people that are a part of your team. They might be contractors. I mean, you might have an accountant that does your taxes. You might have a copywriter that helps you with some social posts. You might have an editor that's helping you with your book. Even if you're in business for yourself, you still have some other people that are going to help you get there. And your relationship with your colleagues and your coworkers, and your relationship with your customers and your clients, those two relationships dictate the success of your business and the sustainability of your business. So we need to do everything in our power to improve both of those relationships. And you just hit on probably the biggest key, which is allowing ourselves to be vulnerable and to establish trust. Because without trust, you don't have any relationship. And, vulnerability is an interesting one. It doesn't mean that you need to share something private from your personal life openly with customers and clients. That's not necessarily the definition of vulnerability. It just means that you're willing to expose yourself, to not knowing what the outcome could be, that you're finding ways to make these things relatable and create these direct connections. And, I hope your listeners know that I'm just like them. I have the same struggles that they have. I'm not a perfect parent. I'm not a perfect speaker. I'm not a perfect author. I'm not a perfect business owner. I have the same troubles they have. If they're having trouble staying present, it's okay. I do too. If they have trouble not looking at their phone, don't worry. I do too. We're all in this together. Where I just think that I'm very thankful. I'm just at a point now in my life where I have a much higher sense of self-awareness in these areas. So now that I know what my problem areas are, I know what my challenges are, but I also know what things I'm really good at, and I can stay in those strength zones. But I have a long list of things that I'm not good at all. But thankfully, I've found ways to either delegate or mitigate those things so they don't really have any impact on my performance. But yeah, being vulnerable and being open and establishing trust and giving people our present in the moment, that's the key to relationships. And relationships are the key to performance and success in any area of our life.
Yes, I absolutely believe that. Yes, I love this, Alan. What I was going to ask you, Alan, is if the listeners were to do an audit on their life, because we're in this new year of 2019, right? And to really kickstart the year, if we were to do an audit and have a look at a few areas of their life and start to create some change there, what would those areas be that you would say we should focus on?
Well, the first one I believe is it's our energy. I mean, it's time and energy. Time and energy are the two biggest resources that we need to perform at a high level. As we've already established, time is an interesting one because it's finite. And as we all get older, I mean, as I said, I'm almost 43, it really starts to shift into perspective that time is not going to go on forever, that each of these days and weeks and months and years are incredibly precious. And I want to be very, I want to make sure that I use them judiciously and use them for things that, again, are bringing me happiness and fulfillment and moving me forward. Because once the sand runs out in my hourglass, then it's over. So I want to make sure that I'm guarding and protecting my time and using it for my meaningful work and my purpose, and not allowing others to suck it and drain it from me. But then the next is energy. In order to perform at a high level, you have to have high energy. Now, that doesn't mean you have to be loud. That doesn't mean you have to be outspoken. That doesn't mean you have to be a Dallas Cowboys cheerleader. You just need the energy to pour into whatever it is that you're trying to perform at a high level for. And in order to do that, you have to make sure that your own bucket is full. You have to make sure that your own battery is fully charged. And because you can't pour anything out of an empty bucket. So you can't serve your client, your clients and your customers if your bucket is empty. You can't pour into your colleagues and your coworkers if your bucket is empty. So the very first step to performance and the very first step to leadership and being a great teammate is pouring into yourself first. So one of the audits I recommend that people do is make a list of all of the things, and I'm saying things in air quotes on an audio podcast, but make a list of the things that recharge you mentally, physically, and emotionally, the things that gas you up. It could be taking a yoga class or a spin class. It could be going for a jog with your dog. It could be, listening to classical music. It could be meditating. It could be, going and reading at a coffee shop, whatever it is, but find the things that refill your own bucket and make a list of those things. And that's part one of the audit. And then part two is take a look at what your normal daily routine looks like, especially the bookends of the day, the morning and the evening routine. How do you spend the first 90 minutes every day when you wake up? And how do you spend the last 90 minutes every day before you go to bed? And then you need to compare those two sets of notes, because if you're not making the time to integrate the things that fill your bucket into your morning and evening routine on a consistent basis, then you're not performing at the level that you're capable of, because there's no way that you're going to have the energy to do that. Not sustainable. We can all have energy really short term. You can put your head down and write for your book for a month straight. But if you're not constantly replenishing yourself and rejuvenating yourself, there's no way you're going to see that thing all the way to the end, all the way through it being published and distributed and marketed and promoted. So we have to take care of ourselves first. And that sounds tricky to some people, because some people internalize that as being selfish, that if you take time out of your day to do something for yourself, that's selfish. And it's not if it's done with the mind of serving others. If LeBron James shows up to the Lakers practice tomorrow and he hasn't slept and he hasn't eaten and he hasn't done his stretches, that is an act of selfishness, because he didn't fill his bucket, and his teammates, they need his bucket to be filled in order for him to raise the level and perform to the level he's capable of. So I think that'd be the number one thing I would tell folks, whether they're players and coaches or they're entrepreneurs and executives, is make the time every day to fill your own bucket, because that way you'll have the energy to perform at your best and you'll be able to get others to do the same.
Alan, great shares. Thank you so much. If you're listening right now, rewind back if you need to and take note. Okay, write it down and make that your focus as you're moving into this new year. Alan, thank you so much, mate. This was such a great conversation, and you shared so many pointers. I'm sure we're going to get a lot of replays on the episode for people taking note on this. So thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Thank you, Joel.
How do we find you online, Alan?
Well, anyone that's interested in the book can go to raiseyourgamebook.com. Anyone that's interested in the other stuff I've got cooking, just go to alansteinjr.com. And I'm at Alan Stein Jr. on Instagram and the other social handles, and love engaging, love, just talking shop. So anyone that's listening, please drop me a line and let's start some talk.
Love it, Alan. And Alan, we end every interview with this last question. And the last question is, if you were to deliver your last 30-second speech to the world, what would that last 30 seconds sound like?
Well, boy, I'd have to wipe away the tears first. Boy, that would suck if I only had 30 seconds. But what I would say is make good decisions. That's the key to life, is make good decisions. If you make good decisions, you'll have a good life. If you make great decisions, you'll have a great life. But as we also know, if you make poor decisions, you'll have a pretty miserable life. So do the best you can to make good decisions.